Words are powerful. The way we talk about our kids, the way we talk about ourselves, they can really transform and change a relationship for the positive or the negative. And so many times, myself included, we can get into talking about our kids in ways that are just not helpful, that they're actually really hurtful. But how do we switch that? How do we switch those dynamics, and why? I mean, we really don't want our kids, right, talking about us like this when they're older and describing us. And when they're looking back and thinking, my dad and mom were this. I mean, we really don't want to create that kind of culture in our family, do we? Where we're always focused on the negative and really pointing it out in such, loud ways, dramatic ways. And so today, Sarah and I really want to tackle that topic of words and how we can use those words to really grow things that we want to grow in our family, instead of using the words to just grow stuff that is just toxic, So if you could take a moment before you dive into it, rate and review this podcast, leave a comment. We'd love for you to give us your feedback about how you're being affected. Email us at Kyle@artofraisinghumans if you have other topics you want us to jump into. But today, get ready just to be challenged about the power of words.
Welcome to the Art of Raising Humans.
The Art of Raising Humans is a podcast designed to support, equip, and encourage parents on how to create long-lasting, deeply connected relationships with their kids that's free from fear and shame. Come join us on the journey. Hello, and welcome to The Art of Raising Humans. I'm Kyle.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
And Sarah, today I want to talk about the power of words. Are words important?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had a stupid question.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, the words we say are powerful, right? Both to ourselves, to each other as a couple, but also to the words that we say to our kids.
Right.
And
I think everyone would agree with that.
Yeah, I hope so. Every listener, words are important. Like the way we talk to each other is powerful.
Yeah, our self-talk is important, right? That it's all a work in progress, but we know that to be true.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of science to show that, right? I mean, just from our internal dialogue, I think everybody listening has heard that or talked about that, man, if I'm just beating myself up all the time or saying negative, it doesn't really bring about anything positive, right?
If you don't know that, learn it now.
That's right. we just shared that with you. Yeah. And we're not coming from a place of just pop psychology. I mean, this is something that's, I'm sure you've experienced within yourself, that if I'm calling myself all types of negative things, right? Like, oh, I'm so stupid, or I'm so lazy, or I'm so whatever, those kind of words actually are demotivating and harmful to me.
And I think we all have those messages, maybe, again, to go back to our childhood, they usually start somewhere there. You had a teacher or a parent or an aunt or somebody who might have kind of taught you that critical voice. We know that children aren't really born with that naturally. It is something that they'll pick up on. And then we carry that into adulthood. You mess up and you think, oh, why did I do that? I'm so forgetful, or I'm so, and we repeat those things over and over, and it's hard to undo.
Well, and you bring that up. I'm seeing there's a lot of kids that have come into the practice over the decade or more that we've been doing this. And a lot of it is, the kids are in elementary school and they're already being so negative to themselves, already beating themselves up, already being so hard on themselves, and it's really hard for the parents to hear that and listen to, right? But I think in this podcast, we really want to talk about, not to say where that necessarily comes from, but ways in which we can help shift how that happens in our home, right? Because I think many times, it's not saying any of these parents do that on purpose or it's their fault per se, right? But it is, we can go down a slippery slope of where we start to shift how our kid is viewing the negative all the time within themselves.
Yeah. And so I think we all can get there as parents, right? We all can do this. And so this is a conversation to shine some light on it and what we can do about it, right? Because that's really what we love to talk about, what the power we as parents have and building our skills to do the best we can.
So I wrote down some specific ones that I've heard a lot lately. Okay. And these are common ones I've heard over the decade or more we've been doing this, but also just ones I've been hearing more lately. Okay. So this is by far not an exhaustive list. And I'm sure if you have some more that you'd like to add in the comments or share with us as a listener, say, oh, I heard this a lot as a kid, or sometimes I say this to my kids. Right. But the ones I've been hearing, I kind of put down maybe like 5. I've heard a lot liar, manipulative, defiant or disobedience, and disrespectful. So those 5. Okay. So I've heard a lot of those lately, and I find sometimes where I'm spending almost a big part of the session just trying to help change the way in which we're saying that. And it's not as if you and I are saying we're going to stick our head in the sand and act like we don't see the negative behavior, and we're only going to look at all the happy moments, right?
They're just so precious all the time.
Right. And so we're not trying to say, instead of talking about those negative behaviors, we only talk about all these other positive ones, right? Obviously, those parents are bringing those behaviors up because they see them as problematic. You know,
I'm surprised you didn't hear lazy.
Oh, you're right. I probably should light that down. So lazy, let's put that one down too.
Yes. Lazy. I mean, liar, manipulative, lazy, messy.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm trying to go through the ones even that have gone through my head or something like, oh, that kid, they're so,
Yeah.
Because, we do this even with other adults, but we do it with kids too. We're like, oh, that kid is, fill in the blank.
Yeah. Well, we have heard, I didn't say this. Sometimes we've even heard sometimes people saying, my kid's a little terrorist, or, other types.
Drama queen.
Yes. Drama. I mean, we've heard those, right? That they just are less common. Yeah. We've heard these, and at times I'm like, it's not to say that's like we're here, oh my God, your kid's gonna be screwed up the rest of their life if you say that or describe them that way. But I am saying, like, when I hear that, I think, wow, I hope that little kid doesn't hear this story a lot,
Yeah. And I think even in ourselves, something like that might hit come into our head, and then we think, oh, don't hold on, And it's sort of one of those like flash, a red flag to yourself, or the flashing little light of, hey, careful here.
It's like a warning light in your car. Caution. Yeah, I'm going like, wait, maybe this is not helpful,
Because in that moment, that child might have lied, or might have fill in the blank,
manipulated that situation. Yeah.
But if we let ourselves go down that road of seeing them that way, it creates all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
And I think at the outset we think, well, yes, I mean, I can kind of agree to that, but what problems does it cause?
Well, I'd ask you this, Sarah, before we get into how we change this, is why do we even define behavior this way? Because I think to some extent, there are ways that we've stopped defining it, meaning that, like, I don't actually hear a lot of parents just call their kids dumb or call their kids stupid. Or call their, these kind of, I think a lot in society in general, we have agreed, well, that's really mean to say that about your kid. Like I think all our kids have done dumb things or actually have said stupid things, right? But we don't just go, wow, our kid, he's just stupid. Our kid's dumb. That just seems like everybody, if you heard that, we wouldn't.
If somebody said that, you think, whoa.
I know, oh my gosh, dude.
Hang on.
Yeah. So, I mean, I typically when somebody does that, there's like a big light goes on and like, that's problematic. But if somebody calls them a liar, manipulative, we might laugh at that or go, I know what you're talking about. My kid's the same way.
Oh, me
right?
too. Yeah.
And so why do we then define it that way? I was just thinking, I think a lot of it comes to just being afraid. Like I said, we don't, there are certain behaviors that we, at least the parents we're around or the ones that we help throughout the country and throughout the world, they seem to focus in on certain behaviors that seem to cause more fear. None of us wants to raise a liar. None of us wants to raise a kid. So there is that component, right? That we don't really want to raise a kid with these attributes, because it's embarrassing for us. It's, scary. Maybe we would have really feel like a failure as a parent. But there's also this sense, I think we don't want to be fooled. We don't want to be taken advantage of. We don't want to look like an idiot, when we believe our kid and they lied to us again, or they somehow tricked us by manipulating us into getting something for them, right? There's that fear as well,
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to it. I think as simple as our brains are pattern seeking and we tend to categorize things. So if your kid does something a couple of times, it's just sort of human nature to go, that's the category they fit in. This one is the liar.
Yeah,
and because you have to do that to survive in life.
Yeah.
If every time I come to this stoplight, a truck just speeds right by or something. If I know in the morning at 8 a.m. at this stoplight, I'm going to be cautious because my brain, the moment that happens, once my brain goes, hey, hang on here, this may not be safe.
Better watch for that again.
Yeah. And so even when it comes to your child lying or something, your brain goes, hold on here. They may not be trustworthy, right? And so because your brain is trying to protect you. And so there's this automatic thing that happens in us that goes, this might not be okay.
Yeah.
They may fit into this category. You need to be cautious.
Yeah.
So it's there to sort of look out for you, but it doesn't always serve us in relationships and with our children, where it serves me at the stoplight. It doesn't necessarily serve me here.
Yeah. And it makes us become really hyper vigilant, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something I hope every listener hears this, okay? Is that yes, every kid at times is going to lie. Yes, every kid at times is going to manipulate. Yes, I mean, all these disobey, defiant, whatever the thing is, disrespectful, that all those behaviors are going to happen. But like Sarah's saying is when our brains are hyper vigilant about looking for them,
Yes.
Like for instance, let's say you had a truck one time, got really close and you almost wrecked, right? You'd be more vigilant about looking for other trucks. And so every time you're driving, you'd be like, oh my God, is there a truck? I think I see a truck, And so I think lots of times what parents don't understand is sometimes the behavior the kid is doing is perfectly normal behavior, right? It's just normal developmental things they're going through, right? Normal cause and effect that a kid is seeing, but the fear will cause us to be hyper vigilant to see it. And then it will start to create this whole like file in our brain of every time they're even close to being that.
Or if they're not even, your brain will, if it looks like the same truck, I'll think that's the dangerous truck, maybe a little bit reaching there, but your brain will start to see things as if even if they aren't there, your brain will see them because of that hypervigilance.
Sarah, this has happened, and I know maybe some parents listening have heard of this kind of situation before, or this happened to you. Where Sarah, I've had parents who have, their relationship with their kid has gotten, kind of hurt or whatever, right? And they're not as trusting, And then I'm helping the kid, and the kid will tell me that the kid comes up and does something sweet and kind for their parent. And every listener knows, what does the parent say in that moment? They go,
they're just trying to manipulate me.
Yeah, they'll say something like, oh, what do you want now? Right? And the kid will tell me it really hurts them because they really actually, the parent has complained how they're selfish. Oh, we forgot to add that one. How they're selfish. How they're selfish. They're never thinking of others. And in this moment, they did something different, and they still framed it like it was the other behavior. And then, I'm sure if anyone's ever been that kid, or you've done, it feels like, then why am I even trying to change?
They're telling the truth, but the parent still thinks they're lying. Or, these kids will sometimes. And maybe you've done this as an adult. You've tried to change something, but people still see you that way. People, you hear that all the time, when you go home for Christmas, and you're like, I am not that person I used to be, but your family can't see you a different way. They always lock you into that. And that's the risk you run with your kid. You'll see things like, that's not what I was doing. But as the parent, you still see it that way.
Yeah, I'm even thinking of, man, I had this one kid too, when you go back to Lazy, I was helping this one kid who, he was working really hard at school, had a job, he had a lot of responsibilities. If he was laying on the couch for more than like 10 minutes, then one of the parents would come in and call him lazy. Now, some people call that relaxing. Some people would call that self-care, right? And I think those the word that comes to my mind is accusing. It's these accusations. So, if we could even throw that in, anytime I'm actually talking about my kid or my wife, for instance, like that, I'm thinking, if I'm talking to my other guy friends, I'm telling them stories about you, and like, my wife is this and this and this, even though there may be some truth to it. It's not as if like all of those descriptions are based in lies, or they're just completely made up, right? They're not fabricated. So, but that's the tricky part. How does accusing that person of that behavior and talking about it in that way, how does that help the change happen? How does that invite better, healthier relationship to grow from that?
And what it does remind me very much is a fixed mindset. We want to be really, really careful to have we want to avoid a fixed mindset. We want that growth mindset. So if we put that kid in that fixed category, then it kind of makes them stuck there. You know, and if they then also, if they start to believe that, which is so easy, you know, those voices in your head, and they then create a fixed mindset about themselves. Like, this is just who I am and how I am, and I can't change. And so then we're mad at them.
For being the very thing we keep telling them they are, right?
Or even if we're trying to be careful not to say it, if we're thinking that, if we have that fixed mindset about them, kids will still pick up on that in our body language, in our facial expressions. Words, we know this, we've talked about this in other podcasts, but words are not always the most powerful. I mean, they're very, very powerful, but they are not the only thing our kids get messages from. Our facial expressions, how we interact, we can't
our reactions
hide,
in general.
We can't hide what's inside. It's going to come out, and kids pick up on that, and then they go, oh, that's my identity.
And that's the power of words, right? So I'm even thinking of saying the kid is selfish, or saying the kid is a brat, or saying these kind of things. These become self-fulfilling prophecies. Okay. So, I mean, if I'm thinking that, like, I'm even thinking, Sarah, like what you're saying, I was thinking, if I think somebody is just stupid, if I think somebody's dumb, I mean, typically it's hard for them to say anything smart, right? And even if they did say something smart, you'd be like, oh, that was an outlier. There's no way. That's not the norm. They shocked me by that smart thing they said, but typically they're a moron, you know? And so as I'm thinking of these accusations, if listeners are watching on YouTube, which if you aren't, go to YouTube and watch us. I'm holding my hands together in like a fist, so that fixed mindset it becomes closed, and it's like the story cannot change because I'm gripping it so hard, Whereas what we want is we want the hand to be open to where it's not that, once again, we're not going with our eyes closed or just
we're not denying something is there. There's a difference that can cross over when you really start to see that person that way, as that, versus, there's a difference between saying someone's a liar and someone lied.
You
can feel it. And when I think of my kid as, this is the kid who always, or who is, that's when I'm going to run into a problem.
You're really going to get resistance most of the time from that person. Okay. So what we want to do is give you steps to change and shift this. Because I think it's so helpful if this is happening in your marriage or even other friendships. This is really helpful to you because we want to be able to change that conversation. We want to train our brain to focus on the behavior that we're actually wanting rather than the behavior we're trying to resist.
Well, and really, so if we have the habit of saying, my kid is lies, and they are a liar, it's really apply that same thing your brain wants to do. Your brain wants to sort of find this pattern and be watchful for something. And so instead of letting your attention go so strongly there, just decide where you want your attention to go and go to that.
So that's step one. So, I mean, this is something that we did early on. And so for every listener, this is seriously how Sarah and I do it. Like, we really don't ever, if our kids were to lie, we don't spend a lot of time talking about lying.
Nope.
We spend time talking about the truth. Because we want our kids to know how to be truthful, how to be honest, right? And once again, it's not to say that there isn't lies happening at times, but we want to shift towards what we want to grow. So in this case, we want honesty. Or when it comes to manipulation, we really want our kids to be able to know we want to work together as a team. We want to cooperate. I remember as a kid, my behaviors could have been described as manipulative, but it was really because I understood cause and effect. I knew if I asked Dad about this thing, he would react this way. If I asked Mom this. And so really, I try to tell parents, if you're seeing manipulation, it's really just a smart and intelligent kid.
Yeah, they've actually done studies on that too. Lying and manipulation are associated with, really high intelligence levels.
Yeah, and then even things like, if you want to call it disobedience or defiance, this is where if my focus is on trying to get them to obey or comply, I want to focus on cooperating together, So it's shifting my focus from the negative, the bad, to instead I'm gonna focus on what I want to focus, because we know that what you focus on, you will get more of. So just take a moment and think about that.
Love that one.
What you focus on, you will get more of. What you water, you will grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
You always want to be thinking about where you want to go, not where you're going, not what you're avoiding, not where you're leaving. Where are you going? So if I'm like, don't want to lie, don't want to lie, don't want to lie, don't want to lie, that's when my brain starts wiring all about lying. And so it does with our kids too, where if I focus on how we communicate and honesty, or if I work on that, then my brain is wiring in that direction. And your children are that way. So wherever you are pointed, that's the direction your brain is going to go. Okay, that's where we're headed.
And so that would be step one. Step one will be, shifting my focus to what I want instead of what I don't want. Shifting my focus towards where I want us to go in our relationship rather than what fear is telling me to stop. And then
you'll see more of it. If you do that, you'll see more of it.
Yeah. And then the second step would be shifting how we intentionally talk about our kids. It's not to say there may not be times you're venting and you're upset, and as a couple I feel so manipulated by them right now. I'm so sick of them lying. Like you might say that in those heated moments, but even when we talk that way, we know that's not helpful to us moving towards a more honest, cooperative, respectful relationship, with our kids.
We're not going to sit there in that. We're going to move out of that, help each other move out of that, and move in the direction we want to go.
In a similar way, just like in our marriage, like if I was frustrated with you in some way and I'm talking to a friend of mine and I'm phrasing it in a negative way, all of my friends would inevitably help me shift it back to a more like what I really want in the marriage. Because that's really what's causing the conflict is I want honesty, not dishonesty, right? I want respect rather than disrespect. So if you have a partnership with your spouse like we do, we really want to keep each other accountable to doing that, to like, hey, inevitably, let's talk about how we can grow this other thing rather than going in circles about how bad the kid is and how all these negative things, because that's never going to help us.
Yeah.
Okay. So third step would be, now I want to invite the kid in to having this type of interaction. So I want to give an example. There was a time when Abby was really little, and I remember this so clearly because this was when we were trying to shift this, at least for me. I think you were already there, but I was still working on it. And that there was one time I'm mowing the lawn, and Abby wanted to go do some water play with some other kids in our neighborhood that had a hose and they were shooting water. And she came to me and asked if she could do it. And I said, no. I don't want you to do that, and I kind of said it because it was inconvenient to me at that moment. I didn't want to have to mow the lawn and watch her because she was only like 4 or 5 at the time. And so then she went inside the house and then came out a few minutes later, and she had a bathing suit on, was running across the street. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I stopped the lawnmower and I go over to her.
You have that dad thing like, oh, dare
no. And I'm like, what is happening?
So
I'm all upset at her. I'm all mad. I'm like, how dare she like not listen to me and not you. So I go over and I get down on her level and say, hey, what did I say? And she said, oh, what do you mean? I don't know. She said, I said you could not do this. And now you're doing it. She said, oh yeah, mom said I could. Oh, and now I'm like, okay, now this is it. I'm going to storm in that house and I'm going to talk to Sarah. I'm so mad about this. How dare she say this after I already said no? She didn't even ask me, right? So I go over inside the house, and when I ask you, you say,
I don't even remember.
She said, you're so funny. You said,
I remember the thing.
Abby said that I told her she could do it, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And so then I was like, oh, now look what we're getting here. We got this kid who's manipulating us. Oh, classic, turn parents against each other tactic. Oh, I'm on to you, Abby, right? But then I was like, okay, I'm not in a good place to talk about this because all I can see is the bad. I'm not even open to hearing her heart on this. It's like she is being bad and I've got to somehow come down on her. So I walked over to her and I said, hey, Abby, okay, listen, I just talked to mom, and I kind of like exposed it. And I say, hey, I'm not going to talk any more about this. You're already in your swimsuit. You're already getting wet. Just go and get wet. I'm going to go mow the lawn. We'll talk about this later. And what we did after I mowed the lawn, I spent that time when I'm mowing the lawn, just getting myself into a more positive place. I love my daughter. Like the whole reason why this hurt was because I want to raise a daughter who I can trust, and I want her to trust me, and I want our words to mean something. And I want, like, if I say no, I want her to understand that, be able to accept that, right? So when we came back, the lawnmower's done, I'm showered, I'm a much calmer place. Then I'm able to get on her level. And I said to Abby, hey, Abby, you know what? When you say things, don't you like it that I believe what you're saying? And she said, yes. And I like it when you believe what I'm saying, right? She, oh yeah, I really like that, Dad. And we have these strings that kind of tie us together to help us believe that. And those have all happened because of a lot of positive experiences where you have done what you said and I did what I said, right? And that's awesome. She's like, I really like that. Today, a few of those broke, okay? Because today, you know what I said. And I don't want us to have a relationship where those strings are broken, where we're always second guessing each other, you know? And she's like, Dad, I don't want that either. And so we gave each other a big hug. And I said, from now on, we're going to be honest with each other. And let me be honest with you. I didn't even listen to what you wanted. Like, I just said no because it was inconvenient to me. And next time I will take more time to consider what you're saying. Now, I may still say no, and I want you to accept that, but I will promise you that I'll take more time. And she said, next time, Dad, I won't do that thing I did, right? We made a commitment to each other. So in this step 3, I found that from then on, I never really had a problem with Abby doing that anymore. You know, if Abby came to me and we spoke, right, there was this understanding of the goal. The goal was creating these strings that help us be honest and truthful with one another, you know? And so what I'm asking the parents to do or telling them to do is go back and with your kid, make sure we understand what do we want these interactions to look like, whether they're more respectful, whether they're more cooperative, whether they're us working together and not trying to manipulate each other, or more honest, whatever that thing is. I want to make sure I invite them in to understanding that's the relationship we want and creating that relationship with them.
Yeah. And it wasn't just how she can change. And
Yeah.
you know, there really was this coming together. And I think there's a very valuable piece to that. If we're always coming to our kid, this is how you're going to change from now on.
Yeah.
You know, and invite them. And if you don't know, like you just think you did everything perfect, ask them, is there something I could do different in these moments? Because maybe you're really not seeing it. But you want to look for, at the end of the day, it's like, how do we both want to show up in this relationship?
What kind of relationship do we want to have long term?
Yeah. And who are we as a family, you know? And so this is how we're going to show up for each other. This is how we're going to be. And we're not always going to do that perfectly, but this is what we're aiming for. This is the direction we're going.
And I'd add in that step. Once you've done that, practice it. Right? Like it wasn't that hard to just say to Abby, hey, let's just practice it. I'll act like I'm mowing the lawn. You come up and ask me, right? And we can do it. Like you can just really and make it fun. And like every time.
If you're silly with it, that's really powerful because, you know, they remember things that have a lot of emotion and you want that to be a positive emotion, not a negative emotion. But and especially with little kids, they'll act it out with stuffed animals, with their toys, grab some trucks, grab whatever you can. But even older kids, I mean, at first there may be some pushback, but be silly and just go through it, you know, help it wire into their brain. This is what we're going to do.
And once again, the practice that you're doing is all about pointing towards the outcome you both want to have.
Yes.
You know? And so
mutually beneficial.
And so if there's anything that you're getting out of this, I know we gave you those 3 steps and they basically were make an intentional effort to focus on the behavior you want rather than the behavior you don't. Also be very purposeful about how you talk about it with your spouse or with others, about how you describe that kid, because even when that kid's not there, it's shaping and forming your brain to make a story about your kid. And that guarantee you're going to hear yourself getting upset about the kid doing things that you have said over and over again. That's what the kid does, right? So then why get upset about it? That's what the kid does, you know?
Well, and honestly, challenge yourself to look for the exception because time and time again, when you think this, then you'll see that all the time. And it becomes this big mountain and you're missing all the exceptions to it. And so be intentional about, I'm going to look for every exception to this thing. You know, if my daughter was forgetting things, it is my job to notice every time she remembers stuff. And before you know it, you realize, oh, wow, she remembers things way more than she forgets.
You bring up, though, a very good point. I'm even thinking, even in our marriage, you know, there's things that we individually pride ourselves on, right? So I see myself as a very decisive person. I make quick decisions. Not always the best ones, but quickly, right? And then you take a long time to make decisions, right? Yeah. And that's actually a strength in our marriage. But there's times where I'm stressed or like our connection isn't as good. And I start to just judge you as a very indecisive person, you know? And so with that thing you just said, like, oh my gosh, like if I watch you all day, you're making decisions all the time. Like it's crazy, like you're not an indecisive person. You're just in those moments that I'm like, oh, I'm highlighting those in my brain to see this as like a problem you have, like be more decisive, it's like, because you are all day long making decisions that you're not spending hours making, So I just point that out, that I'd ask for listeners, just notice that. What are some of those negative behaviors, even in your marriage, or that you highlight and you tend to see really quickly? Look for the exceptions, right?
Honestly, you could even start with yourself too.
Oh, there you go. There you go. That's
or,
not bad.
I don't ever blah, whatever it is, look for the times you're doing the other.
Yeah.
Because it's there, it exists, and we get so focused on the negative and we miss so much.
And then the last part was the whole idea of practicing it, creating a new outcome you want to have, right? And so that way, then you are training your brain and training your kid's brain to be more likely to look for that and work towards it rather than resisting the other, So definitely be intentional. I hope if you listen to podcasts, maybe talk to your spouse today about some of these ways in which we're describing the kids' behaviors in such a negative way, and how could we shift it? Well, what is the behavior we're really wanting to grow, and how could we focus on that? Because I think probably most listeners here, you're not calling your kids dumb or stupid. I mean, these seems to be like really common things in our culture that you just don't say those things. But why not throw in there liar, manipulative, and these other kind of accusatory ways of describing behavior? I mean, we think we're just being descriptive, but really we're just making accusations.
We're making it harder on ourselves.
Yeah, and harder on them to be receptive and open.
Yeah, if you want change to happen, continuing down that road won't get you where you want to go. So how about you switch roads?
Yeah. So I really hope this was helpful to you. Hope it changes some of your family dynamics as we're going into the holiday season and all that stuff. And you can really be intentional about implementing these things, because I really think it will change a lot of the negative interactions or conflicts. It will just help you be more able to guide the kid instead of resisting the kid, which is just so tiring. So we really appreciate you spending time listening. Please share this episode. Tell friends about it, because this can really help change the atmosphere in a home tremendously.
Thanks for listening.
The Art of Raising Humans podcast should not be considered or used as counseling, but for educational purposes only.